Well, by July 2021, all pastoral farmers are required to reduce their synthetic nitrogen fertiliser use to come within the cap of 190 kilos per hectare per year. The new policy is part of the government's recently released Action for Healthy Waterways package. Dairy farmers will also need to report annually to Regional Council details of the weight of nitrogen they applied per hectare. There are natural nitrogen fixes, though, and of course one of them is white clover. It's a low-cost and practical resource for farmers to reduce the cost and environmental impact of artificial fertiliser. Now, Germinal Seeds General Manager and Dairy Farm Manager as well, Sarah Gard, joins us now to discuss. Good evening, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. How are you doing?
Good, thank you for joining us. Sarah, firstly, can you please explain the biology of the white clover plant and its role in how it fixes nitrogen?
Yeah, sure. So white clover is a perennial forage legume, which is really important to New Zealand's pastoral systems. There's a lot of great things about it. It fits really well. Its growth pattern fits really well with a lot of the grasses that we use in our pastoral systems, predominantly ryegrass. It's a really high quality forage, and it can increase the drymatter intakes of grazing livestock. But I guess most importantly, and why we're talking tonight, is that it can fix nitrogen. So white clover is able to capture the atmospheric nitrogen and converts that to ammonia with a symbiotic relationship with the with the rhizobia that live in the nodules on its roots, and then that nitrogen becomes available to the companion species growing with that white clover, so the ryegrass or whatever else is sown in that pasture.
And there has been a lot of comparisons that you have done and experienced on the North Canterbury Dairy Farm you're managing with your husband. Is there also in terms of clover sowing rates, an ability to reduce nitrogen use?
Yeah, so I guess a lot of farmers are going to be facing this nitrogen cap. I think some experts are quoting around 35% of dairy farmers are potentially going to have to reduce their nitrogen usage to fit under this new cap. So I guess what we're sort of aiming to do here is just remind farmers that white clover is a tool in their toolbox that they can use to be able to get nitrogen, and remind them that nitrogen comes from more than just a bag. So yeah, since the early 1990s, really, nitrogen fertiliser use has been increasing, and they've been moving away from relying on that clover fixed nitrogen. So when that's happened, in a lot of cases, the white clover nitrogen fixing abilities have dropped off, because it's been outcompeted by the ryegrass. So it's less able to fix nitrogen because it's losing the ability to compete for that water and lights and nutrients there. So I guess what we're just suggesting to farmers, or just reminding them, is that just to look at their system and see if they could just bring back those grass rates a wee bit, increase that white clover sowing rate, and red clovers as well, increase them up a bit, and just have a look at their grazing management a wee bit, particularly around springtime, and just see if they can tweak that in favour of the white clover. And yeah, look at their soil nutrients and make sure they're in favour of the white clover. And if all those things can line up, then they're able to grab a lot more nitrogen from that white clover and have less of an impact perhaps than what they're expecting they might by reducing their nitrogen fertiliser.
Okay, let's talk about that comparison between ryegrass and white clover. The ability to fix nitrogen is considerably with ryegrass, and it has become a real big tool in the toolbox. What is that risk of just single stands of clover as opposed to the traditional companion plant that it is?
Yeah, so the potential nitrogen fixation of white clover are actually really high, like upwards of 300 kilos of nitrogen per hectare, depending on a lot of things, the farm type and the soil type and the pH and all those sorts of things. But actually the average rates of nitrogen fixation in New Zealand are only around 185 kilograms of nitrogen. And so that comes back to, like I just said, those things that have reduced the clover's ability to fix nitrogen, that basically being outcompeted in a lot of cases by the ryegrass. So, yeah, I guess just sort of revisiting the system and how it could be tweaked a little bit. Nitrogen leaching is influenced by a lot of things. Predominantly the soil type, the plant uptake, and the weather, really, the rainfall, things like that. So yeah, I guess it's just coming back to reminding farmers that the white clover is there for them, and it's not just nitrogen from a bag.
Yeah, I like that term. And let's talk about the numbers. How does it stack up in terms of return on investment for that fixation and, of course, leaching rate.
Yep, so upping the rates of the sowing rate of white clover is relatively cheap when you look at the cost of white clover versus the cost of fertiliser from a bag. So yeah, by upping that by a few kilos, and there's always things for the farmers to remember, if they're dairy farmers or, the risk of bloat and things like that, which can be mitigated, but just to be reminded of. So yeah, the cost of increasing the clover sowing rate is relatively small compared to the cost of nitrogen fertiliser, and then the pasture growth rates, if the nitrogen is more available from the clover, shouldn't suffer too badly.
What about grazing management with white clover? Is there some best practices that you're not seeing that around the country that we should be with that particular pasture?
It just totally depends on the system. So that springtime is quite important when that ryegrass is really getting away before the clover is. Just making sure that there's some frequent grazings in springtime to open up that pasture and let the light into that white clover so that it can get its stolen growth away. And then just depending on the system over summertime, if the sheep farmers just not hounding that white clover and nipping away, because then that can affect the stolen growth. So it's not any dramatic changes that are required from what farmers are generally doing. It's just kind of remembering and having that in the back of their mind, just to make sure that they're sort of looking after that clover, I guess.
And what about dry land farming versus irrigated?
So white clover's got a fit everywhere, really, and there's different types of white clover that are more suited to different situations. We have a white clover available that's crossed with Caucasian, and so it's really suitable for those dry land situations. Got greater water use efficiency. So yeah, there's obviously the growth potential of the whole pasture as a whole is different in dry land versus irrigated, but yeah, the general principles are the same.
Sarah, choose to answer this how you wish, but in regards to an input cap as opposed to an output measurement of, for instance, overseer, which is the one only tool we really have in the toolbox, what's your thoughts on how we should be mitigating the nitrate leaching into our waterways?
Look, I guess we've got what we've got, don't we? And overseer is definitely far from a perfect system, and I think just about everybody knows that. So yeah, I guess it's just a matter of working with what we've got, and I think that hopefully it's going to be a bit of an adjustment for farmers, but just remembering that I guess we're all wanting the same thing, and everybody's wanting healthy waterways. Nobody's setting out there to destroy them. So it's just I guess remembering that ultimate goal, hopefully. But there's definitely going to be a lot of farms in different places around the country that are a lot more affected by this. Or a lot of these legislations that are coming into play. So, hopefully there'll be good reminders like this to remember these tools that they've got, and new technologies that are coming available all the time to help them out. Yeah,
and there's a lot going on in that space with Germinal Seeds. I've been following what you're doing there. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Sarah's Country, General Manager for Germinal Seeds, Sarah Gard. Of course, a reminder in the toolbox that there is white clover and that natural nitrogen fixing.
This is Sarah's Country.